Hello! I want to thank you in advance for taking a look at my recent watercolor portrait. I'm going to mention some of the things that I actually did here prior of actually placing the paper on top of the wooden plank. One of the first things that I actually do, and this is not to actually stretch the paper per se, but to have the paper on both sides watered. So I actually submerge the paper about 5 seconds to 1 minute into the water, and I leave it there for a little bit. Just want to make sure that the water covers the entire paper sheet. And then after that, I place that same sheet on top of that wooden plank that I have. And what happens is that basically you're sizing the paper, and it makes it more watery. It's also good like if you lift or you like to do a lot of washes on your watercolors. I feel that this helps tremendously, and it allows the paper to kind of just stay put because it gets attached to the backing of the wooden plank. However, if you feel that it's just too much of a hassle, or perhaps you feel like you're going to damage the paper, because once the top part might be a little drier, since the other side of the paper is actually still pretty much humid, you will have a little bit of buckling. So if you don't like to do that, also when you're doing something like this, don't tape it, because otherwise the tape will ruin your paper. So I mean, there's pros and cons. I really like to do stuff like that because it allows me to, I don't know, like lift better. And you can do this with any watercolor paper. I know that once it starts buckling or coming back to size, some people feel uncomfortable with the paper and they feel like the best way is to actually stretch it. But you can actually use a blow dryer to stretch it from the back side if you have a little bit of an issue with buckling. So this is how I actually started this portrait. Also, what you see here is that I did the drawing first and then I started doing my washes. And since the paper is pretty much very wet, the washes also tend to become very extremely light. So you really don't have to worry about messing up the paper. It allows me to deal with that. Purpose is that I actually do the very wet like that, and I actually leave the paper pretty much wet all the time. I also have the on top of already the paper being pretty much wet, also the brush has some water in it, so you have to be mindful of that. However, I feel like when you're applying washes over washes continually like this, it helps to lighten out, and also it doesn't dry as darker as if you just wear humid like putting water on top of the paper instead of the backing. So I actually got myself a box of Winsor and Newton, and what you see me using here is a lot of shadow color for the eyes and also for the mouth. For wherever I felt like, okay, you know what, I can work a little bit with the shadow, I just use one color, didn't mix anything. I also have a little bit of black in there just to give me a good shadow, because remember, this is going to dry way later. So if you put, for example, right now I have an umber right now, putting it on all over the place, and also the black, it will not really stain much because the paper is so wet. So I feel like that's why I kind of like to work this way. Like you can see, I keep adding shadows, shadows on the nose, shadows on the mouth, shadows on the hair. And I do apologize. I feel like every time I'm recording a video that the phone is actually capturing everything. And what I did was that I zoom into my phone to get all the details because I really want people to see how the water expands on the paper and how the paper actually works when you're doing this type of thing. But I forgot that when you do something like that and you're using your phone actually doesn't capture everything that is going on. And then there's other parts of the paper that you're basically not covering. So for the background, I really wanted this very bubbly, very almost forest-like with lighting and everything. So I started adding my greens. And to the greens, I added a little bit of the blue just to give it a bit of making it look like it's foliage on the back. I actually used a reference photo that I found online, and the model is actually in a very different position. And I also changed the hair and some of the stuff that I felt like it really wasn't conducive of what I really wanted. So a couple of things when I feel like when I'm working with, personally, when I'm working with a portrait or I'm working with something that I just creating out of whenever and I have a photograph, I like to make my own changes. I don't like to do the exact face because that's not the purpose here. Yes, you want to have a liking, but this is, for me, this is not really a commission. It's just something that I'm doing on my own. I thought on actually giving her some type of crown and making flowers on top of her hair, but I just wanted to paint and I just wanted to get off from the routine. It was actually on Friday, I think last Friday, and I had a very long day at work and I just wanted to relax and sip a little bit of wine and just have fun with what came out. I really thought that I was going to mess it up because since I actually wet the paper so much, I was like a little bit worried because I know it was going to start buckling, but I said, you know what? I'm just going to wait until it buckles and then we're going to blow dry from the back and we'll see how it ends. So this is actually one of the colors that I pull out from the Winsor & Newton pack. And the color that you see is actually, perhaps they should have a number, but this is actually cobalt violet and it's a very light pink, which I actually like. I'm also going to mention some of the colors that I actually use. And this is of course for your own reference. This one, it was cobalt blue, of what I remember, of course, because I have them on lemon yellow, just a little hint, a little bit of orange, cadmium orange. I'm going to do it a little slower. I'm not good at this with like time-lapsing a video and talking over it. Raw amber, and I believe I used a little bit of red because I wanted for her cheeks. For her cheeks, I used Scarlet Lake, which is pretty dense, but like I said, because the paper was so wet, both sides kind of just expanded all over. For her hair, if I'm not correct, I'm probably wrong, but I'm sure that it was burnt amber. And Winsor & Newton burnt amber, it's pretty light. And you also have to remember that there's two ambers. So there's raw amber and then there's burnt amber. And the amber around the nose and the shadow, it was actually raw amber with black noir. And in this case for Winsor is ivory black, just black color for the shadow. And like you see, because I had the paper was pretty wet, it actually didn't saved or damaged the paper and I was able to lift. I like to paint with music whenever I have the chance. I feel like it relaxes me. Sometimes it depends on the mood. Sometimes I even use rock and roll or whatever that I want to hear. But most of the time I like very soothing music. I don't like to be around too much noise because the whole idea of doing this is to kind of just settle down for the day. And art for me, it's sort of like at the same time that is a major for me is a great career. It's also like a major therapy for me. It relaxes me, puts me in a good mood. It just takes away all the stress out of the day. And I feel like every time you open a sketchbook or you open a watercolor pad or oil, whatever it is, the medium of your choice, I feel like every time you do kind of just makes you feel good because you're doing something good for yourself mainly. And also for people to watch creativity is actually pretty cool. Every time I see other people doing the same thing, I feel happy. You see me smiling because I don't know, like I can relate to that person that is doing that. So what I just did before before, yeah, I was actually fighting with my phone, so I do apologize. My phone was actually getting out of battery. And what you see me doing here is actually a blow dry in high speed blow dry the paper from the back side and from the front side. And what happens is that now you have, I'm sorry about that. Whoops. Yes. So what happens is that you have a pretty good, very straight paper. And I know, like I said, I'm going to be adding more washes and more water. So that's the part where it's going to buckle a little bit, but it doesn't really affect the painting in any way. I think that for me, it's perfect because it actually helps with what I want in the and how I want the paper to, well, how I what I want from the painting to do. So I actually have Amber on her eyes. One of these, she has these very beautiful light brown eyes on the photo. And I really did like her eyes very much, and I wanted to put it down onto the paper. I added several colors onto her hair. I added amber, I added raw amber, and also the darker one, also a little bit of that yellow color, and I completely changed her hair color and except where it was going. So I wanted to keep it the same way. And then after I did all of this portrait, I finished it with colored pencils. I've been dealing with colored pencils pretty recently. Excuse me, I'm not a color pencil artist at all, but I feel the subtle grain of the color pencils just give the watercolor a reinforcement. And I've been doing this for a couple of the portraits that I have done and also some of the paintings. So after I do all the washes, which is about 3 or 4, and I completed part of the whole face, I start adding the color pencils, which you will see in the near future on this video. These videos are actually recorded live, and I usually use landscape mode to make sure that I capture everything. But like you say, I wasn't really like looking at the phone, and it was pretty late that day, so I really just wanted to finish it. My time to work on artworks is whatever time I have available. I really don't have a set schedule. Like I said, I actually work, and I don't have like a time frame where I'm going to say on Monday from such and such time I'm going to work on my art. If it's possible, I will work on a sketch or artwork of any type. And recently, because of the time, I haven't been using oils. Basically, what I've been using, what I feel that is easiest is watercolors. So you'll see me working on watercolors for a while. And if I have the chance, now during the winter time, then you'll see me doing an acrylic here and there. And then later, perhaps creating a little bit with oils. So I actually started doing and recreating or creating the background, and I actually look at the photo. The background that she had was almost like if the photo was blur on the blurred background photo, and I really liked it. And I know this was like the perfect way of creating a watercolor background because I don't know, it's always like basically the same. And I feel like I tend to do really strong backgrounds. So having a little bit more of a pastel look on a background, I felt very comfortable in doing that. And you see me just leaving some of the spaces blank for the watercolor and also splashing watercolor all over. I really wanted this portrait to be, yes, at least a little bit more spontaneous and just painting something. So at this very moment, what I'm going to do is actually make sure that the paper is pretty much dry because I'm going to start working possibly with the color pencils, and I change all my materials. That's the only thing that I really, oh well, I'm filling up my cup too. But that's the only thing that I feel that you have to be careful when you're working with watercolors. You don't want to add the other medium and the watercolor being wet because you can actually ruin not only the painting, but you can ruin basically the paper. So you don't want to, you want it to really dissipate and really be dry completely, at least where you're going to work with the other medium. I feel like it's important unless you're working with another base water media like wash or acrylics. But most importantly, I feel like in case of color pencils, you have to have that paper completely dry. So I believe 100% that by now the paper from the backside is pretty much still a little bit less humid than the frontal, but I always check both sides. And you can see it lifting up, but that's, like I said, that's not much of a problem. The color that I use is mainly black on her eyes. I wanted to really have that really strong shadow on her eyes. And that's what you see me doing here. When you're applying watercolors, you want to lift at the same time. I'm not sure how to explain this, but if you really look at the picture, basically just going with the wash on top of the eye, and then I'm pushing with my brush that the color, and at the same time I'm adding water. So it's almost like mopping technique basically. I think is that's what it is mopping. So if you don't know what mopping is, this is basically what I'm doing right now. You're gonna see me adding the darkest color, and then you're gonna see me pushing back that color with water, and it actually works pretty well with wetting to wet. Or if you want to have that really like gradients technique, it's actually pretty cool to use it this way. And it allows you, like I said, it allows you to be able to lift, which is for me something that it's a plus because I wanted to be able to lift any mistakes if I when I make mistakes on the paper. I want to be able to lift with the brush. Another thing about lifting is that some people, I don't know, if you're like beginning and you're really like struggling, or when you're starting off with watercolors, lifting, you don't have to really lift. your color hard on your with your brush, just a very soft way of lifting. And the paper actually has to be the paper and the paint. Well, the paint is already wet, but the paper must be humid so you be able to actually lift with the brush. And you have to be careful how many times you're actually lifting, because you don't want to ruin your paper. I have ruined many times tons of paper by lifting. So that's why I'm actually letting you know not to rub it too hard, because it can ruin your paper. And if you're already almost done with your painting and you're lifting and you break your paper, that's not gonna be good. So just take your time, be very calm. Watercolor, I feel also, watercolor is a medium of patience. So just take your time, breathe, have a sip of wine, and then you lift. So again, for the hair, like I said, I actually left it a little bit more lighter. And since it was pretty wet, it allowed me to not give too much shadow. I wanted to have hair all over the place, and I did that with my brush there. I also added a little bit of that wash with the umber wash, a little bit all over her face, because I felt like it was showing too much of the white paper, and I feel kind of iffy when that happens. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but I don't know. I feel iffy when that happens. So I actually try to my best to get rid of that white side of the paper. So, like you see, I'm actually dragging with me part of her eyeshadow. I wanted her to have this hopeful look slash sadness slash, I don't know, like just looking forward to something, but I actually drag every single part of her face. I drag all of the washes that I created. Remember that if you're going to use colored pencils, that's going to actually be reinforced with the colored pencil if you actually missed any parts with the watercolor. I added some green also on the side of her hair. And like I said, I tried to splash all over, and I just wanted something really watercolory at the same time. So right now, what I'm doing is actually, you can see here that I am blow drying both sides, the back of it and also the front because I wanted to make sure that the paper was actually dry, because right now we're going to start using the color pencils and I cannot have any pockets of water in the paper. Even though it's pretty much superficially dry, it's still like in between, I guess, whatever it was compressed, cold press, the pressing. I still probably much make sure that everything, like I press down, I touch the paper to make sure that is completely dry. Just want to make sure, because if you don't, like I said, you can draw in the paper with the color pencils by scratching the surface. Also, the back side, I had a little bit of pockets, which actually what happened is that I actually was able to get some air around it. A lot of people have told me, hey, when you're drying your paintings, don't do hot air because you can damage your painting. But what I do is that I do both. I do cold and hot, almost like an exercise to make sure that it goes back to size. And it actually has been working, and I've been doing this for quite some time. What I'm using now is about the same color umber on her eyes, and I'm going around and kind of just making her eyes a little bit more circular with the pencil and also creating part of the shadow. What you see here is actually creating more shadow with that black pencil. And I was like, well, I have to be careful because I feel like if I'm adding too much dark, I'm gonna have to keep on going with dark. And I don't, by then it was almost 10:30 at night, and I was like, I gotta go. So I have to be precise with the shadows. But it actually worked because I was able to um, mix these colors in with other color pencils, and it worked for me pretty well. I did color pencils all over her hair, also her face. I feel like it gave it a little bit more of a fresh look, and at the same time it made her more real. Because I don't know if you noticed right now, her eyes and everything else, she looks good, and it's definitely a portrait, but it gives you the almost doll like color, or dolly like face, which is, there's nothing wrong because I actually like it too, but I really wanted just a tiny bit more realistic. And I think that using the color pencils allows that to happen. I use the white pencil on her eyes because with the color, like whenever I feel like if I went too much onto with the watercolor, I add the highlight. Highlights mainly, I use Prismacolor color pencil, which is pretty strong, and I feel that the wax of the actual color pencil allows you to repair whatever damages, if any. I gave some highlights under her eyebrows because I wanted her to have some highlights, and I also added some highlights on her lid, on her nose, and I added white all over because after that I'm going to be layering also color, and I didn't want the colors to be too strong neither for her face or all over the place. I really feel like adding white and then adding some of the colors will help you also not be too strong when it comes to shadows. And I really did this all over her face. I added the white part, or the white color with the color pencils, and then I went in with other colors and I layer, and I also added the white again. Now you see me adding a little bit more of that shadow, same color on top of that white, and I'm going in, and I don't do, in here it looks like I'm actually pressing down onto the paper, and I really am not really pressing down onto the paper, but it looks like I'm pressing. It's not really. I'm actually doing this very lightly, but the colors are actually very strong. Oh, by the way, this is Polychronos water color pencils. I haven't used watercolor pencils. I think they also do watercolor pencils, but I haven't used. Like I said, the white part of the paper was giving me the cooties, so I tried to kind of just make it less. I use this pink color, almost like fleshy color that Polychronos has, and I also layer it on top of that brown. I really wanted her shadows to really be there, but I think color pencils actually help me develop those shadows as well. So everywhere I had the opportunity to give a little bit of that color, rosy color on her cheeks, on her neck, everywhere that I feel like, okay, you know what, I can use this color here. This is what I did. And then again, I'm going in with that dark color pencil to add more highlights, and I go over her eyelid, and I also go under her eyes because I really wanted that to be more reinforced. And whenever, like I said, wherever I put in like that white paper, I actually added with the color pencils. So right now I'm actually pressing down and doing part of her hair. And I was actually thinking to leave it alone, but I said no, let me just do this with the color pencils. Her eyelashes, I find it the most difficult because once you have so much layer of color in it, to do the highlights or to do the eyelashes with the color pencil, I feel like I don't want it to look too fake. So that's what you see me doing here. And then she had a lot of possibly fake eyelashes, so I think that that's one of the things that when you're looking for a photograph you have to take into consideration. You want someone, I feel that it's more easier without makeup, but if you find someone with makeup, try to not mimic it because it can, like I said, it looks a little bit fake, but at the same time I enjoy it because usually the models that I actually picked are without much makeup. So I was like really looking at her makeup, and I was like, oh, she has fake eyelashes and she has a lot of glossy lip gloss, and I was like, oh, I like that color. And I really enjoy, like I said, this was a nighttime, and I try my best to kind of just relax, more so to relax and to do something artistically than doing something for any other purpose. So, like I said, once the paper is actually pretty much dry, it's going to start buckle, or it goes comes back to size, and part of like the corner starts to lift up, so you can actually stretch it a little bit like I just did there. I'm going here with a very pink. I'm going over her cheeks and over parts where I'm sure that it has some muscle in it, also under her eyes, and everywhere that I could actually get that pink color to work for me. So right now I am actually painting everything that I can think of that has a little bit of that muscle tone or rosy tone, and I'm also adding it on her lips. She had like this type of mauve color on her lips, but I was like, how can I mimic that without adding some brown? And I really didn't want it to put any burnt amber or sienna or anything in her lips. So I added this pink color, and I think it actually worked pretty much on her lips. Then I went in for her corners, and I added a little bit more of a darker red, and I added her lips and part of what I saw on the picture. Also, she was actually showing her teeth a little bit, so I tried to mimic that as well. Again with the white color, and this time with the Prismacolor, I'm going to go and kind of just make it a little bit less noticeable, the shadow color that I actually added. And I do that everywhere that I can think of that is going to help the painting. I again reinforced the eyes, and she had a lot of a lot of shadow underneath her lower lip, but not actually on her lip, but under her lip. And I was like, oh, I kind of like the look. And so I did basically the same thing with the colored pencils. To finish down her lips, I actually added a tiny bit of that blue because I just wanted to mimic the shadow of her teeth and really not ruin it at this point, because I feel like for me the most difficult part is actually open mouths, because you have to have the shadow on your mouth, which is like a purple, sometimes a dark blue will work. So that's what that's the color that I'm actually using. So right now I'm adding a little bit more of the shadow with the colored pencils, and I find a little bit of a difficulty right here. I'm not sure, and I'm not saying she does, but I think she had a little bit of a nose job, and that shadow for her nose was quite a bit difficult, very difficult. And I was like, when I saw it, I was like, no, I think I messed up right here. And you're gonna see me adding a little bit more of the white on that side, because I personally did not like it. Also, I was looking at the way the photo was taken, and she's looking definitely upwards. So I said, this also, it's the cause of the portrait not being so great. But I really just like I said, I just wanted to do something artistically, really not caring. And I really, really, at the same time, thought that the model was very beautiful. And she had these very huge eyes. that I actually like. In person, she actually looks like a doll. And so personally, I felt like this is a very beautiful human being. I just need to try it and do it in watercolors and see how it comes out. So what you see me doing here is basically just rubbing the white color specifically on her nose. I really didn't want that shadow to become too much, and I also did it on from the corner of her eye to her nose, and also I apply a little bit of the highlight on her mouth. And as you can see here, when you're adding the color pencils, it actually springs up the color and it just looks like it's popping out. Those lips look like they're popping out of the paper, and I feel is because of the highlight with the color pencils. I also use gouache on this portrait, and you're gonna see me doing it. I know when people see me doing this, they go hysterical, but I'm actually stretching the paper at the same time. This is not harming the paper whatsoever, or harming the painting. It's just for, so I'm able to use it because, like I said, all that water and plus the size is actually buckling. So I have to stretch it. That doesn't, like I said, I do it very gentle, but it looks rough. Yes. And I noticed that too. I was like, "Ooh, I'm kind of rough with the paper," but at the same time, it's good for the sizing, believe me, and it makes it straight. What happens is some people have like, like the main question is, will it go back and make it straight? And what I do after, and this was actually thought, someone teach me that what you can do after you do something like this is that you can put this artwork in between books, and the pressure from the books will make it completely straight. So maybe in a day or two, once you put the watercolor underneath those books, obviously dry, and when you take it out, it's going to be completely straight. So the pressure of the books will also help. Guys, I hope that with all my heart that you enjoyed this portrait. I use gouache for some of the highlights of her eyes and also her hair. And like I said, this is practice mode, and I hope that you guys enjoy it as much as I did. And with that, I'll say good day or good night, depending on where you are. Thank you again for watching. Truly appreciate. And if you make it this far, you can actually follow me on Twitter. My name on Twitter is Mary Cruz Art 19. I also have an Instagram account, which is called Watercolor Painter Art. Hope to see you then. Until next time, have a really amazing week ahead. Bye.